All righty. It is, I'll just make a note of it.
Sure.
Wednesday, August 28th, 2019. I'm sitting here with Myrna Tashner, and we're going to give a little introductory overview on alternative emotional self-care, which sounds melodic, you know, and I know that it involves flowers and essences and so forth. But Myrna, what's it mean?
What it means is, as a psychologist, I see people in two different categories. One, where they want somebody to take care of them, and two, where they want to be responsible for themselves and their mental health and their emotional health. I really gravitate toward that second population, those who want to be responsible and take care of themselves, which has been my passion throughout my career as a psychologist. I started out the etiology of that word is from Greek, psyche meaning soul, ology meaning science. So it really means science of the soul. But that's not the way psychology in academia works. And I looked really hard for it. I ended up as a counseling psychologist, but my focus was always on helping people or allowing people to heal by way of counseling, by way of initially counseling was the only thing available to me. Now I have access to, I'm a trained hypnotherapist, but the latest interest for me is flower essences. And how that came about was the person who was training me as a hypnotherapist had access to flower essences. I also had access to them. I got them at Mount Shasta. They're all over the place there. And the herbalist would say, well, try this. And there was a interesting feeling in your heart, not in your head, but in your heart.
Now, what kind of flowers are involved? I'm always curious about this stuff because they're everywhere. You know?
Yes, and that's a wonderful curiosity because that's the kind of person I want to work with, and I love working with. When Edwin Bach, came up with this, he was a bacteriologist, and he had a very successful homeopathic practice in London.
This is like back in the 1920s and 30s and stuff?
Right, right. He sold his practice in the 1930s, and he moved to the North England countryside. And
I've lived there. It's beautiful. There's wildflowers everywhere.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's what he realized, using his own body, were elements of healing. What he called them was herbal essences. He didn't call them flower. He called them herbal. And by testing them himself, by just taking the petal of a flower and putting it on his tongue, he realized an emotional shift. And after 5 years of research, he came down to 38 flowers that deal with emotional healing of fear, anger, jealousy, the basic human emotions. And when they're out of a line, that causes a disturbance in the heart area.
Yeah.
And with the flower, you don't have to know what the flower is doing, but what the flower does, it has a frequency, a high frequency. Nature has very high frequency. We don't pay attention to that.
Right.
And especially here in the United States, where we're so technologically oriented and speed and stress and so forth, we get away from nature, and yet that's what people long to do, and thus camping and RVs and so forth. What he discovered within these 38 was that when the flower, and they're wildflowers, interestingly enough, you'll find them in your backyard as wildflowers. You either mow them or spray them. Hopefully you don't spray them.
Right.
But they're really very potent. And he didn't want to destroy the flower. Herbalists who make tinctures use the roots and stems and leaves. Well, he was such a man of the heart, such a man of God, of the spirit. He didn't want to do it that way. He fought, and he realized, as I had shared before, that just the petal changed.
Right.
So what he did was harvest the blossom when it was at its highest energy, which is just before it dies. At a certain time of day, when the sun was at a certain zenith within the heavens, and the temperature was just so, he would pick them and put them in a bowl of spring water and let them sit in the sun for 12 hours. That fluid that water contained all the energy of that flower. So that's what he called the mother. And then he would bottle that. And when it came to working with people, he'd just put a drop of the flower under the tongue of that tincture, or that essence rather. And the person would realize an emotion, a feeling of alignment. It didn't intellectually happen.
Right.
You didn't think about it.
Right.
And it's not like a therapist saying, well, what caused your anger? That's not what this is.
Right.
What this is the flower connects from the heart to your essence. Because your essence is of high frequency. Call it essence, call it higher self.
Right.
And what that flower does is it opens that pathway between your essence and whatever the emotional disturbance was.
And I don't know if we're talking the same things or similar things or whatever, but my wife is into all sorts of things, oils and what have you.
Oh, good.
And we have for a long time, and I showed you before we came up here to the studio, the dogs we have. We rescue greyhounds, and they tend to be pretty wound up, but because we rescue, they tend to have a lot of emotional baggage that they carry along, and they can't express it very well other than through their behaviors. And we have discovered over the years that if we take a little bit of lavender and put it on a thing around their neck, a little necklace and so forth, it calms them down. And we'll take lavender and rub on their ears and up on their, and they don't know what's going on, but they chill. It's an amazing effect. Is that the same sort of?
It's the same thing, except
the process is different.
The process is different because you're not. An essential oil is a heavier, thicker, and it's only used externally usually.
Right.
You can put some in water and drink it, but that's a whole nother process.
Right.
You could actually. I use this with my cat.
Mm-hmm.
I put Rescue Remedy in her water dish when we traveled in the motorhome because she'd get hyper, although she loved the motorhome.
Right, yeah.
And just one drop, and it would calm her down. Because animals can use this as well. But it's the frequency. What it's doing is it's releasing, it allows the release of the fear, of the anger, of the anxiety. And you don't have to think about it. You don't have to know. All you have to do is be willing to align, to take the tincture, the flower essence, one drop under your tongue, and you just are quiet, and you allow yourself to feel what's happening, and you can't make a mistake. Because if that particular flower you chose to use or was given to you wasn't correct, then because it's energetic, it in no way impacts the body.
Okay. So it's not like there's going to be harmful side effects. No. You go to certain medications and so forth.
Exactly.
So in an overview sense then, what kind of flowers are we talking about?
Bach had 38. And he has a little book that costs $4. And in it, he started out with 12 wild flowers and then eventually worked it. We're talking about flowers of the trees, such as the aspen tree, the walnut tree, the chestnut tree. Okay. We're also talking, as I said, about wildflowers. So we're talking about clematis. We're talking about wild rose. We're talking about
the state flower of Iowa, by the way, the wild rose is.
It's and wild rose, interestingly enough, is for healing trauma, long-term trauma. Let's see, the flower of the crabapple, the flower of the gorsie. Now, gorsie is what, interestingly enough, Pooh would fall into when he'd be climbing around in the forest. He always fell into the gorsie bush and end up with pricklers. Well, gorsie that is a wildflower of northern England, and it's the blossom of the gorsie. He ended up in the pricklers. But heather, holly, things that you...
That's wonderful.
Honeysuckle. It's the blossoms.
Yeah.
And it's that vibratory frequency. I'm very much interested in it because my passion is to help people be well. I know they can be well by going to an allopath, or current day medicine. I know they can get well by doing therapy. Those are good modalities. Yeah. But this is one they can do themselves.
Yeah.
and it doesn't interfere with the others.
Right. I mean, the first phrase we used was the alternative emotional self-care,
Yeah.
which it's right there in the palm of your hands, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And you have it yourself.
Yeah.
Now, where do you get them? Well, here in town we have because we live in Des Moines and we have a good base of natural grocers. We have
Yeah.
the natural grocer, we have Whole Foods, and of course the mother of natural grocery here in town, Campbell's. They all carry the Rescue Remedies by Bach.
Okay. Oh,
And you-
really? Cool.
yeah.
And that's
And-
just like the musician Bach, right?
Yeah.
Edward Bach.
Edwin.
And I'm
Bach.
looking at the book, and it's like maybe, well, let's see how it is.
It's
one
less
of
than
those-
100 pages.
Yeah. It's one of those little back pocket paperback books you can just
Right.
stick in your back pocket and take with you, or read on the bus, or if people
Right.
ride buses anymore.
Yeah, or
Anywhere.
Uber. Yeah. But in this book, he outlines the impact that particular flower would have on an emotional state. And he talks about the positive of it. That's the first thing he goes over. And then he identifies, some negativities that might lead to that emotional state.
Okay.
And when I work with people one-on-one, when I teach classes, what I do is hand out a little piece of paper with a 38 on it, and then write down the emotions and ask the participants in the class to check off those that they're experiencing. And then out of that, go for 3. Because we are an evolving soul entity. As we heal one, there's another layer that comes. Eventually, if you sustain and continue to be aligned, because that's what the whole purpose is, to
Right.
align you with your higher self, or of the universe, you can reach a point of peace and calm in most situations. And if you happen to have a disturbance, you know that Rescue Remedy is very helpful. You also know that Star of Bethlehem, which deals with trauma, is very helpful for trauma. I use it when I'm driving on the freeway and somebody cuts in front of me, and it scares me. But I carry them with me all the time, because I've found that even taking 1 drop of Rescue Remedy under my tongue to prepare for this helped calm me. Now Rescue Remedy has 6 different flowers in it. But it's, under $20, you can have a way of helping yourself. And you don't need to know. All you know is that you feel good.
Yeah.
You don't need to know all the ins and outs and whys. Your mind's going to want to know.
Right.
But
right.
that's okay.
Yeah.
The mind can have a vacation.
At the beginning level, you just need to know this is what you do.
Right.
So Myrna, you're going to be putting this somewhere. How do people find out more? We've already mentioned the book, but if they want to contact you, what do they do?
Okay, that's a good question. To contact me, they can reach me at my website, which is myrnatashner.com.
Okay, and that's MYRNA, no space,
No space.
TASHNER.com.
Right. And there's a place where they can give me their name and address and what their question is, and that's an email that's shot to me. It's on the first page.
Okay.
It describes, the whole website tells a lot more about me, but that's how they get in touch with me.
Right.
They can also call me and leave a message on my cell phone, and that number is 515
Okay.
480
Okay.
3071.
Okay. And I'm going to write that down as you say it again. 515
480
480
3071.
71. And that's the cell phone for Myrna Tashner if you have questions about flower essences. That's amazing. I mean, it really sounds like even the process itself sounds like such a relaxing process.
Bach, thank you for saying that, because that is what Bach wanted. He wanted these flower essences, these flower herbs is what he called them, in everybody's kitchen.
Yeah.
Therefore, they can't hurt you. They help you.
Yeah.
They're for adults, they're for children, they're for pets. There's no harm.
Yeah.
If you contact me and you have a specific question, I can guide you, and if it gets more into that, we'll do some work with it. But this just gives you an introduction to know that you can do it. You have that power, that potential.
That's cool. We'll be doing more of these. This is just episode 1, we'll call it. And Myrna, it's been fun. I've known you for some time, but it's fun to get to know you like this, and I look forward to step 2.
Thank you. Kim, it's